The gala shimmered, then fractured into chaos. President Vargas's son, Mateo, crumpled, his face ashen, clutching his chest. Elite doctors surged forward, a whirlwind of frantic expertise, their voices sharp with alarm. Kira Nuvuk, a quiet rookie nurse, was a ghost at the periphery, her presence barely a whisper amidst the unfolding nightmare, her anxieties dismissed as typical rookie jitters. As the cacophony mounted, her eyes, however, found a single, chilling detail, a barely perceptible tremor in Mateo's hand that spoke volumes only to her. A wave of ice-cold dread washed over her, then a flicker of fierce resolve. She'd seen this before, in places where hope was a luxury and conventional rules didn't exist. While the world saw a tragedy unfolding, Kira saw a desperate, impossible puzzle, one she knew, with a certainty that thrummed through her veins, she was destined to solve. The sterile hum of St. Jude's University Hospital's cardiac operating room was a different kind of silence than Kira was used to. Not the deafening quiet of a remote jungle outpost before a storm, but a polished, almost arrogant hush, underscored by the precise clicks of instruments and the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Here, status was oxygen, and Kira, a rookie nurse from places barely on the map, felt her own breath thin. Mateo Vargas lay exposed, a testament to modern medicine's invasive brilliance. Dr. Alim Khoury, a titan in the world of cardiac surgery, moved with practiced grace, his hands swift and sure, yet a thread of tension, fine as surgical silk, pulled taut around him. He was performing a complex repair on Mateo's catastrophic aortic dissection, his every command a decree. "Nurse, suction," Khoury snapped, not quite looking at Kira, who anticipated the need a beat before he vocalized it. She moved with fluid efficiency, her quiet competence an invisible hum beneath the surgeon's spotlight. He didn't see her, he saw a tool, an extension of the system. Dr. Ingrid Olsen, the chief of surgery, observed from a corner, her posture rigid, eyes like chips of ice. She wasn't scrutinizing Khoury, she was scrutinizing the procedure, ensuring every line was followed, every protocol obeyed. Her very presence was a silent guarantor of St. Jude's unyielding standards, standards Kira instinctively knew were often insufficient in the face of true chaos. Kira's gaze, though, kept straying from the immediate surgical field. She was monitoring Mateo's peripheral perfusion, a subtle dance of color and warmth in his exposed tissues. A minute fluctuation, a fleeting pallor around his nail beds, caught her eye. It was barely there, a whisper of a warning that conventional monitors might not yet register, a shadow she'd learned to dread in field hospitals where every second counted and equipment was a luxury. "Dr. Khoury," Kira began, her voice a little too soft, a little too tentative in the grand theater, "I'm just noticing a slight change in perfusion, distal to the repair site. Could we reassess the proximal pressure line?" Khoury paused, his scalpel hovering. He finally looked at her, his brow furrowed in annoyance. "Nurse Nuvuk, focus on your instruments. The monitors are clear. We're on schedule. This is an aortic dissection, not a case of cold feet." His tone was dismissive, a low growl that carried the weight of his reputation. A senior resident shot Kira a sympathetic, yet warning, glance. "Rookie mistake." Dr. Olsen's expression remained unchanged, but Kira felt the invisible weight of her judgment. A flush crept up Kira's neck, but her gut clenched tighter. The monitors were clear, but her instinct screamed otherwise. This subtle sign, combined with the earlier tremor, was gnawing at her. It wasn't cold feet, it was the chill of a coming storm. She swallowed, retreating into her role, but the tension coiled within her, a silent, desperate countdown. She was a ghost in the machine, and the machine was deaf. The machine, indeed, was deaf. For a few agonizing minutes, the surgery continued with a deceptive calm. Kira, a silent sentinel, tracked the monitors, her gaze flicking between the subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in Mateo's vitals and the surgeon's oblivious motions. Her internal alarms blared louder with each tick of the clock. The faint tremor she'd noticed earlier in the tissue around the repair site seemed to deepen, a barely visible pulsation that didn't align with a stable closure. She felt a cold dread snake into her gut, a familiar premonition from countless times in makeshift clinics where instruments were few and miracles were expected. Suddenly, the smooth, methodical rhythm of the operating room shattered. A sharp, guttural gasp ripped from Dr. Khoury's throat. A dark, viscous gush erupted from deep within the surgical field, a crimson tide overwhelming the meticulous work he'd just completed. The monitors shrieked, a cacophony of alarms echoing the rising panic in the room. Mateo's blood pressure plummeted, his heart rate spiking wildly before beginning a terrifying descent. Bleeding. Massive hemorrhage. Khoury bellowed, his voice cracking with a terrifying mix of shock and unadulterated fear. His hands, moments before so precise, now trembled visibly as he fumbled for clamps. The air crackled with a palpable terror. The president's son was dying, swiftly, violently, on their table. Suction. Get more suction in here, now. Dr. Olsen, usually an impenetrable fortress of composure, barked, her eyes wide with alarm. The residents moved like panicked automata, their faces pale, their movements clumsy. Khoury frantically probed, his brow slick with sweat, his earlier arrogance melting into stark, desperate helplessness. He was a master of grand gestures, of precise, planned repairs, but this raw, unexpected chaos was beyond his practiced responses. His usual solutions felt inadequate, too slow, against the relentless, arterial surge. Kira watched, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Years of dealing with catastrophic injuries in conditions where every second, every drop of blood, meant the difference between life and death, surged through her. Her mind, usually so quiet, now raced like a supercomputer, processing probabilities, evaluating desperate, unconventional pathways. She saw what Khoury couldn't, what the rigid protocols of St. Jude's had never prepared him for. A daring, almost impossible manual technique, born of necessity and improvisation in the most remote corners of the world, ignited in her thoughts. It was reckless, it was forbidden, but as Mateo's vitals continued their terrifying freefall, Kira knew it was the only way. The ghost in the machine was about to become a desperate, defiant force. Isn't it amazing how often the quietest heroes are the ones with the most extraordinary courage? Kira's story resonates with anyone who's ever felt overlooked, whose unique ideas were dismissed. If you're as captivated as we are by tales of the unsung rising to greatness, we invite you to become a cherished part of our global community. Hit that subscribe button now. Your support not only helps us bring you more compelling, high-quality stories like Kira's but also connects you with fellow enthusiasts who appreciate the power of human spirit. Join us, let's celebrate these incredible journeys together. The ore became a tomb. Mateo's vitals didn't just falter, they plunged, a relentless cascade towards an abyss. The rhythmic beeps of the cardiac monitor, once a comforting thrum, now screamed a frantic, dying lament. Oxygen saturation plummeted. Blood pressure vanished. A long, agonizing flatline on the monitor seemed inevitable, etching itself into the horrified silence. Dr. Khoury, the maestro of the operating theater, was frozen. His usually commanding voice was reduced to a guttural whisper of repeated, useless commands to his overwhelmed team. His brow was slick with sweat, his eyes wide and vacant, reflecting the impossible magnitude of the failure. He was trapped, paralyzed by the weight of expectation, by the rigidity of a system that offered no playbook for this level of unprecedented chaos. Every instrument, every protocol he knew, was suddenly irrelevant, too slow, too delicate for the raw, arterial gush threatening to claim the president's son. He hesitated, caught between desperation and a desperate, futile hope that something might change without his intervention. Kira watched, her own heart a furious drum in her chest. Every cell in her body screamed for action, for the brutal, decisive intervention that her remote field experience had ingrained. Her past, filled with life-or-death decisions made under duress, without resources, without permission, collided violently with the pristine, rule-bound world of St. Jude's. The fear was immense, fear of career suicide, of public humiliation, of the wrath of Dr. Khoury and Dr. Olsen, of becoming a pariah in this elite institution. It was a cold, gripping terror that threatened to bind her limbs, to silence the scream rising in her throat. But then, her gaze flickered to Mateo's face, pale and translucent on the table, fading before their eyes. The boy wasn't just a patient, he was a life, vibrant and full, now flickering like a dying candle. In that moment, the sterile white walls of St. Jude's, the disapproving eyes of her superiors, the crushing weight of protocol, all of it dissolved. All that remained was Mateo, dying, and the impossible knowledge pulsating in her hands. A profound, visceral shift occurred within Kira. The quiet deference, the gentle humility that had defined her, shattered. It wasn't courage in the traditional sense, not a fearless leap into the unknown. It was a raw, primal defiance, born of absolute desperation, a sudden, blinding clarity that the only thing worse than breaking the rules was letting this boy die. Her fear didn't vanish, it transformed into a focused, searing heat, a resolve forged in the crucible of impossible circumstances. Her hand, as if with a will of its own, reached for a specific, delicate set of instruments Khoury had discarded earlier. Her body moved, subtly at first, then with an unyielding purpose, positioning herself closer to the surgical field, invading the sacrosanct space of the lead surgeon. Her eyes, usually downcast, now met Khoury's, blazing with an unshakable conviction. She didn't ask for permission, she demanded the space, the chance, to save a life. The quiet rookie nurse was gone. In her place stood a force of nature, propelled by an ancient, untamed imperative to do. Kira moved. Not with haste, but with an accelerated, almost ethereal purpose. Her left hand, steady as granite, reached inside, gently displacing tissue with a practiced grace that belied the monumental task. Her right followed, not with a scalpel or a clamp, but with something far more ancient and intimate, her fingertips. They seemed to possess an impossible, almost psychic awareness, navigating the intricate, blood-slick landscape within Mateo's chest with the certainty of a blind person traversing their own home. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion, just a pure, unadulterated flow of action. A collective gasp, soft and involuntary, rippled through the operating theater. The scrub nurse nearest Kira dropped a sponge, the slight thud jarring in the sudden, profound stillness. Dr. Chen, the anesthesiologist, momentarily forgot to check his readings, his eyes fixed, wide and unblinking, on Kira's hands. What they were witnessing defied every protocol, every lesson, every unspoken rule of the sacred surgical space. Stop. Nurse. Cease and desist immediately. Khoury's roar ripped through the air, guttural and laced with absolute fury. His voice, usually a command, was now a primal bellow of a lion whose territory had been invaded. He lunged forward, hand outstretched as if to physically restrain her, but the surgical draping and the sheer audacity of Kira's movements held him momentarily suspended, an arm's length from intervention. His face, already pale with panic, was now a mottled crimson, veins bulging in his neck. But Kira didn't even flinch. Her world had shrunk to the rhythmic thrum of Mateo's fading heartbeat, the slippery feel of tissue beneath her gloves, the precise, almost microscopic adjustments her fingers made. Her breathing was shallow, controlled. She was no longer Kira Nuvuk, rookie nurse, she was an extension of the critical moment, a human instrument calibrated for one impossible task. Her eyes, usually so meek, were now points of unwavering focus, seeing beyond the chaos, into the very heart of the problem. Dr. Olsen, observing from a few feet back, stood frozen. Her initial reaction was pure, visceral outrage. This was insubordination of the highest order, a career-ending transgression, a direct assault on the sterile, hierarchical sanctity of the OR. Her mouth opened to echo Khoury's command, but no sound emerged. Instead, her gaze was snagged by the impossible ballet unfolding before her. Kira's fingers, almost impossibly slender, were performing a feat of anatomical manipulation that Olsen, with all her decades of surgical experience, could barely comprehend. It was crude, barbaric even, yet executed with a terrifying, beautiful precision. A murmur of disbelief began to rise from the edges of the room, quickly stifled by the weight of the moment. The nurses, usually stoic, exchanged horrified, then awestruck glances. They saw not a rogue nurse, but a woman possessed by an urgent, life-saving imperative. Khoury continued to bark, his words growing more frantic, but they seemed to lose their meaning, absorbed by the singular, mesmerizing focus of Kira's hands. Each slight adjustment, each delicate compression, each movement of her fingertips seemed to hold Mateo's entire fate in its balance. The air itself crackled with a dreadful tension, as if the very fabric of reality was stretching, bending, under the strain of Kira's audacious defiance. The steady, horrifying beep, beep, beep of the monitor, Mateo's lifeline flickering, seemed to slow down, holding its breath, waiting. Then, with a final, almost imperceptible tremor, Kira's hands stilled. The frantic dance of her fingers, the impossible ballet of pressure and release, found its ultimate point of equilibrium. Her entire body, previously a conduit of pure, desperate focus, seemed to slump inward, as if the very air holding her erect had been exhaled in one colossal breath. A single bead of sweat, freed from her temple, traced a slow, deliberate path down her cheek. The horrifying beep, beep, beep of the monitor, which had been a death knell only moments before, gave a final, desperate cry, then changed. It wasn't a sudden silence, but a gradual, almost shy normalization. Beep, beep, beep. Slower. Stronger. Regular. The erratic, desperate flutter on the screen that indicated Mateo's heart was failing began to smooth, finding a rhythmic pulse that, while still fragile, was undeniably present. Dr. Khoury, frozen mid-shout, watched the monitor. His mouth, still open in a furious snarl, slowly, impossibly, closed. His eyes, wide with disbelief and outrage, suddenly narrowed, then widened again, this time with a dawning, terrifying comprehension. He stared, not at Kira, but at the surgical field, then back at the screens. The chaotic, crimson deluge that had defined the last few minutes was gone. Replaced by a controlled, steady stillness. A collective, shuddering gasp rippled through the OR, a wave of raw, visceral relief that swept away the suffocating tension. A scrub nurse, who hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath, let out a soft, choked sob, covering her mouth with a gloved hand. Another, usually unflappable, openly wiped a tear from her eye. The air, which had crackled with the static charge of impending doom, suddenly felt lighter, breathable. Kira, utterly spent, took a shaky step back from the table. Her hands, still encased in gloves, trembled uncontrollably, not with fear, but with the violent aftershock of adrenaline and the profound, physical exhaustion of having wrestled with death and won. She didn't look at anyone. Her gaze, distant and heavy-lidded, seemed fixed on some far-off point, her triumph a private, internal blaze. Dr. Olsen, who had watched Kira with a mixture of horror and grim fascination, now stepped forward, her stern expression slowly dissolving into something profoundly different. Her eyes, usually hard and assessing, softened, a flicker of something akin to awe replacing the rigid disapproval. She reached out, not to reprimand, but to steady Kira's shoulder. There was no need for words. The steady beep, beep, beep of the monitor, the rhythmic rise and fall of Mateo's chest, the impossible calm in the once raging storm of his wound, these were the validation. Khoury, finally tearing his gaze from the now stable monitors, looked at Kira. His face was a roadmap of conflicting emotions, shock, humiliation, disbelief, and finally, a grudging, almost fearful respect. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The president's son was alive. And a quiet rookie nurse, against all odds, against all protocol, had saved him. The impossible had been done, and the silent, pulsing rhythm of Mateo's heart was its undeniable proof. The stunned silence in the operating room was deafening, punctuated only by the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of Mateo's now stable heart monitor. Dr. Olsen, her hand still resting on Kira's trembling shoulder, was the first to break the spell. Her voice, usually sharp and authoritative, was now hushed, tinged with an unfamiliar awe. "Kira," she began, then paused, searching for words. That was extraordinary. Unprecedented. She looked at Khoury, whose face was still a mask of bewildered shock, then back at Kira, her gaze unwavering. "Someone get Mateo to recovery. And clear this ore. I need a full report on everything." Her look implied a protective shield around Kira, a tacit endorsement that went beyond the immediate crisis. Kira, still reeling from the adrenaline, felt a wave of exhaustion crash over her. She simply nodded, her eyes downcast, not seeking praise but absorbing the sheer relief that Mateo was alive. Her hands, which moments ago had moved with surgical precision, now felt heavy and tired. She was a rookie, yes, but those hands held the stories of countless dire situations in remote clinics, where ingenuity was the only currency and every second counted. She didn't have fancy degrees from prestigious universities, but she had something far more valuable, a relentless dedication to life, forged in environments where standard protocols were luxuries. Before the team could fully process the enormity of what had happened, a quiet buzz began to spread. A junior resident, heart-thumping, had managed to discreetly capture the entire dramatic confrontation on a hidden body camera, an illicit practice, but one that now served an undeniable purpose. The footage, raw and unfiltered, leaked within hours. It showed the chaos, Khoury's panic, Kira's defiant intervention, and his furious command. The surgeon told her to stop, followed by her miraculous save. The video went viral with a speed that eclipsed any hospital PR campaign. The rookie nurse who defied a surgeon to save the president's son screamed headlines. Social media exploded. People were captivated by Kira's quiet heroism, her stark contrast to the arrogant surgeon, and the raw, desperate courage of her actions. Comments poured in, "This is what real heroes look like. Forget the rules, she saved a life. That surgeon should learn from her." Suddenly, Kira Nuvuk, the invisible rookie, was a household name. St. Jude's, usually a fortress of decorum, found itself at the epicenter of a global media storm. Calls flooded in from every major news outlet. Kira's modest background, her years spent volunteering in underserved communities in the Arctic, the self-taught ingenuity born of necessity in rudimentary field hospitals, all came to light, painting a picture of a compassionate, resourceful individual who saw solutions where others saw only despair. When confronted by the sudden onslaught of fame, Kira remained characteristically humble. In her first brief, overwhelmed statement to the press, arranged by a now chastened Dr. Olsen, she spoke softly, I saw a way. And Mateo needed it. Anyone would have done the same. It was a lie, of course. No one else had seen it, and certainly no one else had dared. But her sincerity, her absolute lack of self-aggrandizement, only deepened the public's admiration. The world didn't just see a skilled nurse, they saw an embodiment of selfless courage, a testament to the fact that true expertise sometimes blossomed far outside the gilded halls of elite institutions. She wasn't just validated, she was revered, a beacon of hope for every unsung hero. Mateo Vargas's recovery was nothing short of miraculous, a testament to the fact that even the most dire predictions could be defied by a single act of audacious courage. He left St. Jude's weeks later, a public symbol of resilience and a quiet, profound bond forming between him and the unassuming nurse who had pulled him back from the precipice. His father, President Vargas, became a vocal advocate for recognizing overlooked talent in all fields, his speeches often echoing the unexpected genesis of his son's salvation. For Dr. Alim Khoury, the immediate aftermath was a professional crucible. The leaked footage, while ultimately exonerating him from any direct error in the initial surgery, starkly highlighted his momentary paralysis and Kira's decisive intervention. He faced scrutiny, but more painfully, a profound introspection. The world-renowned surgeon, accustomed to unchallenged authority, had been shown his own limits. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, his arrogant posture began to soften. He initiated a rare, private meeting with Kira, not to apologize in so many words, but to acknowledge her unorthodox brilliance and, in a gruff voice, to confess he'd learned something invaluable that day. Khoury, surprisingly, became a quiet proponent for a new, hospital-wide initiative to encourage and evaluate non-traditional solutions, his formidable intellect now directed towards innovation rather than solely tradition. He hadn't just gained a grudging respect, he'd gained a sliver of humility that made him a better doctor, and perhaps, a better man. Dr. Ingrid Olsen, initially a staunch defender of protocol, underwent the most dramatic transformation as a leader. Having witnessed Kira's genius firsthand, and then managing the public's overwhelming reaction, she swiftly understood the need for radical change. She spearheaded reforms at St. Jude's, dismantling some of the rigid hierarchical barriers and establishing a rapid response innovation unit, specifically designed to leverage diverse, unconventional medical expertise, with Kira Nuvuk at its helm. Olsen's tenure as chief of surgery became defined by this shift, forever changing St. Jude's from an institution valuing pedigree above all to one that sought out and nurtured true, raw talent, no matter its origin. Kira Nuvuk, no longer invisible, found herself navigating a new reality. The deluge of opportunities was overwhelming: research grants, speaking invitations, even offers from prestigious international medical organizations. Yet, she remained grounded. She accepted the position at St. Jude's, not for the acclaim, but because it allowed her to continue practicing the hands-on, problem-solving medicine she loved, now with the resources and the platform to make an even greater impact. She used her newfound voice to advocate for nurses and medics from rural and underserved communities, ensuring their unique skills and perspectives were finally recognized. Her authentic life wasn't about escaping the limelight, but about channeling it, using her story not for self-aggrandizement, but to inspire a future where every unsung hero had the chance to shine. The ripple effect extended far beyond St. Jude's. Kira's story became a beacon of hope, reminding the world that courage often wears a modest uniform, that expertise isn't always found in gilded halls, and that true change comes from individuals brave enough to challenge the status quo. Her actions didn't just save a life, they ignited a quiet revolution, fostering lasting change, human growth, and an inspiring belief in the power of unexpected heroes. Kira's incredible journey reminds us that true heroism often emerges from the most unexpected places, proving that courage and unique skills can shatter even the most rigid systems. It's a powerful testament to the impact one individual can have. What unsung heroes in your own life deserve recognition? Share their stories with us in the comments below. If Kira's extraordinary spirit resonated with you, please consider subscribing to join our global community. Your support genuinely helps us create more inspiring and meaningful stories like this. Thank you so warmly for watching and for being a cherished part of our journey. Together, we celebrate the extraordinary.